In this video, we will be discussing the top 7 most haunted battlefields in the world. During the invasion of Okinawa in World War II, the Japanese fought from an extensive series of prepared underground bunkers and interconnecting caves. This forced the Americans to flush them out one by one in heavy fighting. The United States Navy, Marines, and Army forces invaded the island on April 1st, 1945. The battle would rage for 82 days before the island was declared secured. Total casualties, including civilians on Okinawa, would exceed 160,000 before the battle ended. Many of these were suicides by civilians. While the Marines and Army battled the Japanese across the island, Japanese kamikaze planes attacked the supporting American fleet in waves, causing heavy damage to some ships and heavy casualties among some crews. Small boats were configured as suicide attack boats and sent out against the American fleet. The Japanese forced young Okinawan boys and old men into Japanese uniforms and frontline service, leading to their deaths at the hands of the Americans. The Japanese also forced civilians into several caves and provided hand grenades and poisons for them to use in mass suicides. In one of the caves, Chibichirigama, the Japanese had included a veteran of the war in China, and he insisted that the civilians resist the Americans with whatever they had or follow the order to commit suicide rather than submit to capture. The civilians followed his orders, some fighting with bamboo sticks and grenades, while others administered poison to their children before taking it themselves. 84 of the civilians in the cave died, most of them by suicide, as the Americans subdued the remainder. Other Okinawans committed suicide across the island, convinced by the Japanese of the bestial behavior to expect from the Americans. Today, the Chibichirigama is reported to be haunted with the sounds of children screaming and sobbing and cries of fear and pain reported by many who have visited the cave. Others have reported being instantly overwhelmed with feelings of fear or complete despair upon entering the cave. A memorial was erected outside of the cave to honor those who died there, but it was destroyed in 1987 by Japanese nationalists who found it to be insulting to the emperor. The victims of Chibichirigama were not combatants, but civilians caught up on a battlefield, casualties of war which some believe still haunt the place of their death. Number 6. The English Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses were a series of bloody civil wars for the throne of England between two competing royal families, the House of York and the House of Lancaster, both members of the age-old royal Plantagenet family. The wars were waged between 1455 and 1485. The Wars of the Roses earned its flowery name because the white rose was the badge of the Yorks and the red rose was the badge of the Lancastrians. After 30 years of political manipulation, horrific carnage, and brief periods of peace, the wars ended and a new royal dynasty emerged. During the English Wars of the Roses, a battle took place in Towton in the early part of the year 1461. Approximately 30,000 individuals died in total. The battle is said to have taken place during heavy snowfall. Now it's reported that every 7 years, the town of Towton experiences a similar heavy snowstorm. If one walks out into the storm, to the site of the battle, they'll see the two armies fighting for a little more than 3 hours. Then they disappear for the next 7 years. Number 5 is the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was fought on June 25, 1876, near the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, pitting federal troops led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer against a band of Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. Tensions between the two groups had been rising since the discovery of gold on Native American lands. When a number of tribes missed a federal deadline to move to reservations, the U.S. Army, including Custer and his 7th Cavalry, was dispatched to confront them. Custer was unaware of the number of Indians fighting under the command of Sitting Bull at Little Bighorn, and his forces were outnumbered and quickly overwhelmed in what became known as Custer's Last Stand. The Battle of Little Bighorn is sometimes known as Custer's Last Stand and was a battle between United States cavalry forces and members of the Lakota tribe. The U.S. cavalry was very much so overwhelmed and defeated, in addition to being outnumbered. However, despite this, the casualties were relatively small at about 450 total. Beginning in the late 1940s, reports of the Custer battlefield being haunted began to surface. In August 1976, 100 years after the battle, visitors Visitors reported strange and sudden drops of temperature while standing on what is now called Custer Hill, where his body was found following the battle. Visitors reported murmuring sounds, but actual words were impossible to make out. Employees and visitors have claimed to have seen mounted Indian warriors near the site, which vanished when approached. Buildings on the site, erected by the Park Service for the use of park rangers, have reported a strange locking and unlocking of doors, lights being turned on when the building is unoccupied, and other inexplicable phenomena. If you're enjoying this video, then smash the subscribe button. Number 4. The Third Battle of Ypres, also known as the Battle of Passchendaele, occurred during World War I near the village of Passchendaele in Belgium. It was between the Allied nations led by Britain against the German Empire. The battle took place on the Western Front from July to November in 1917 for control of the ridges south and east of the Belgian city of Ypres in West Flanders. The Germans were hit with thousands of guns and shells, and aerial photographs at the time show as much as 1 million shell holes in just a mile's area of land. Nearly 400,000 would die on all sides. The battlefield was difficult to navigate thanks to heavy rains and thick mud. Thin strips of wood were laid down to travel across the muddy land, but one wrong slip and one probably wouldn't be able to make it up again. Almost 100,000 soldiers who died were never identified. Now it's said the village is haunted with sounds of the battle, screams, gunfire, and other phantom noises that can be heard at random times. Number 3 is Chickamauga Battlefield. The Battle of Chickamauga was fought between September 18th and the 20th of 1863 between the United States Army and the Confederate forces in the American Civil War. This battle marked the end of the Union Army's offensive in southeastern Tennessee and northwestern Georgia. It was the first major battle of the war fought in Georgia and the most significant Union Army defeat in the Western Theater. The battle involved the second highest number of casualties after the Battle of Gettysburg. The total number of dead and wounded were more than 30,000 men. The most famous ghost located on the battlefield is Old Green Eyes, who some don't really know how to categorize. It may be the decapitated ghost head of a Civil War soldier, or it may be a battlefield roaming Native American creature with long hair, fangs, and glowing eyes. Number 2 is the Gettysburg Battlefield. The Battle of Gettysburg is widely known as one of the bloodiest battles in the American Civil War. More than 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or lost in action. The Battle of Gettysburg was the largest ever fought on the North American continent. It produced the greatest number of casualties of any battle of the American Civil War. Today, anyone who visits Gettysburg can attest to the creepy sights and sounds that they'll find there. You can even take a ghost tour. Some say that up to 10,000 soldiers still haunt the battlefield to this day, and it's not just the battlefield that experiences paranormal activities. Nearby historic buildings experience it as well, especially those that were used as makeshift hospitals during and after the battle. From ghostly apparitions on the battlefield to eerie noises to odd lights, visitors report a wide variety of odd occurrences on the actual battlefield. In nearby buildings, anything can happen. Doors lock on their own, flights flicker, and objects move freely. And number 1 is the Battle of Stalingrad. With more than 2 million deaths, the Battle of Stalingrad has been called one of the most deadly battles in all of human history. The battle saw the clash between Soviet against German troops. Germany and its allies were fighting to gain control of the Russian city. In the summer of 1942, Hitler launched a major offensive into southern Russia, seeking to destroy what was left of the Soviet army. The initial advance went well, and the German 6th Army, under General Friedrich von Paulus, was ordered to capture the city, but Stalin demanded it be defended at all costs. Every available soldier and civilian was mobilized. Stalingrad was heavily bombed by the Luftwaffe, and the ruins became the scene for months of bitter street fighting. By October, most of the city was in German hands, but the Russians clung onto the banks of the Volga, across which they ferried vital reserves. The battle lasted more than 5 months, with the Soviets ultimately winning. Now, entire sections of neighborhoods in the city are said to be extremely haunted by the dead. It's reported that the dead have continued living their normal lives as ghostly figures roaming the places where they once lived.